Welcome to the Self-Publishing Experience, the quarterly podcast about indie publishing from the team at Troubadour Publishing. Here are your hosts, Stephanie Carr and Jeremy Thompson.
Welcome to the 6th episode of the Self-Publishing Experience podcast, where the team at Troubadour bring together industry insights, author conversations, and tips and tricks designed to help out anyone interested in self-publishing.
In this episode, we'll be looking at audiobooks. We'll speak to a professional narrator about how important it is to collaborate with the author, one of our Matador authors who's produced an audiobook, and looking at how we can help you with producing your self-published audiobook.
Audiobooks are by far the fastest growing market in publishing, predicted to see a growth of 30% in 2020 compared to 2018 according to The Independent. The emergence of new listening devices such as smart speakers like Alexa, making it easier to access audiobooks, has been attributed to the surge in growth. There are also many more platforms where you can listen to audiobooks instantly, allowing you to choose how you want to listen, whether this be through buying a copy from Audible or even streaming a copy through YouTube or Spotify. You're no longer restricted to the humble CD and trying to find a CD player. It's not just how you choose to listen, but how you pay as well. There's still, of course, the option to buy and download a copy, but you can also take out subscription packages with Audible where you can pay a monthly fee to receive a certain number of audiobooks. It's also a lot easier now to produce an audiobook, with most publishers offering this service, and ACX, part of the Amazon network, now offering a platform to connect narrators with authors.
While that may be the case, it's still an expensive product to produce, which often surprises authors. There are quite a few costs to take into account during the narration process, such as the studio hire time, the sound engineer's time, along with the voice actor's fee. It can also be a lengthy process, but if you want a professional product at the end of it, it's worth spending the time.
I definitely agree. It also gives you another version of your book to market and promote, and there's evidence that having your book available across multiple platforms can be really beneficial to sales. There are specific bloggers out there who only review audiobooks, so you can direct your marketing towards them. It gives your author brand more gravitas, especially when you can link all of the formats together online. And as mentioned earlier, more people are listening to audiobooks now than ever before, so you don't want to miss out on the readers, listeners, who have changed how they access books and now prefer audio.
So I think it's time to hear from a professional voice actor. Let's listen to what Chris Devon had to say when he caught up with our digital production controller, Andrea Johnson. Chris has narrated over 40 audiobooks and wanted to discuss how important collaboration was between the narrator and author.
I am Chris Devon, narrator, voice actor. I am here in my home studio somewhere in the middle of England, and I have narrated just over 40 audiobooks. And I'm here today to talk about mainly collaboration between the publishing community, the writing community, and the voiceover community, because we are definitely all in this together. If you want to find out more about any of my activities, stuff I've narrated recently, you can go to chrisdevon.com or follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Mr. Chris Devon.
So when you start, what do you ask for from the author to begin with?
Before sort of the production process, if you like, obviously you have an audition process, because it's really important that you match the right voice with the right writer. And to be honest, we have all had experiences where we have listened to audiobooks and maybe the voice doesn't quite sit with you. It doesn't quite feel as comfortable in the context of the story with how you're sort of internalizing everything with the story. Sometimes it isn't that perfect marriage, but honestly, when it does happen and the right narrator meets the right author, absolute magic happens. So the first thing that will happen is the audition process. So, a number of narrators will be in the conversation. For example, as you know, Lexie Reese, who wrote Eternal Seas, she listened to several narrators. Fortunately, I was one of them, and her together with her son, her business development manager, I think she called him, went through those voices together and wanted to determine which one is the right fit for these characters, for young Finn and Arya and their father and these mystical creatures that they encounter along the way. Who's the best representative of that world, of that story? So that's the first thing, really, is a successful audition process that you need to begin with. And then I then basically ask them a little bit more about their background into researching these characters. You know, do they have a sense of where geographically they're from, or can we place it somewhere, even if it's in a totally fictional world? Are there influences from different parts of the world that maybe we can feed into this character? You know, Lysana in the Eternal Seas book, the first Relic Hunters book, very much influenced by the Caribbean and a little bit of South America as well. So you have those conversations to help determine the direction of the character, but a lot of it really is down to the narrator and the narrator's interpretation. We are actors at the end of the day, and we're bringing our own personality into it just as much as we're representing the authors as well. So that's why it's really important to have that marriage made in heaven, you know?
Yeah, that actually makes sense as well, because sometimes I suppose when you read something on a piece of paper, you don't understand the full personality, you don't understand how the author managed to develop those characters. So if you've got a little bit of backstory to them, you can kind of bring a bit more personality to the characters.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And it's always good to have some nice little references to real life as well. So I mention Pippin, who is a young, sprightly, young, excitable girl in Eternal Seas. And she was very much influenced by a character in my life. So I've got a West Highland Terrier called Colin. I do this scrappy little Glaswegian accent when he's running around the house chasing after pigeons and stuff. And Pippin is very much inspired by him because she's so excitable and she's so hyperactive. And there were a lot of Scottish influences, of course, in that book as well. So it was just perfect. I can use Colin's voice for this. This is great. Colin's in a book, sort of.
Oh, that sounds really good, actually. So do you read the whole book before you start narrating it, or do you do it as you go?
At the very least, I'll read, a very large portion of it. I'll read at least half of it because, you need to get to know the characters, of course. You need to get a sense of where these characters are going. And it just makes for such a better read. When you've got that sort of foreshadowing in your head, thinking, okay, in what's going on in this guy's head right now? The reader doesn't know yet what's about to happen to this character, but in the context of the story, the characters, have a lot of prior knowledge. So if we're about to find out that a character does something absolutely devastating, then that's going to change their tone of voice considerably. So I always try and read as much as I can beforehand, and it just makes for a smoother read. You make less mistakes, so it's less editing afterwards. And it's just a lot more enjoyable.
You've mentioned that you quite like to have the author involved, and obviously you like to know a bit about the history of the characters. Would you ever have the authors there whilst you are narrating?
So I've been involved in voiceover, both in narration and also in the commercial world as well. But I've not been in a situation yet where the author actually wants to listen to me narrate live. More often than not, they hear the audition. After that, they don't hear anything else generally until the book is done, which is actually a little bit scary sometimes. But sometimes we will check in and we'll talk about specific characters that might appear in certain stages of the book and say, just so you're aware, there's a character that pops in, and just be prepared that you might need to take on a bit of an accent. So you need to have a little bit of preparation in that regard. But generally, they don't hear much else other than the audition, a sample, until the entire book is finished.
As a professional narrator, what would you say to an author who wanted to record and narrate their own title?
I've experienced audiobooks myself as a consumer and listened to authors narrate their own books, and it can be great. Now, the good thing about authors narrating their own books is nobody knows that story more than you. Nobody knows the characters more than you. I think in principle, it's great if you feel comfortable doing that. On the other hand, I've spoken to authors that have said, thank goodness you're narrating my book. I'm really not comfortable with performing in that way. They have that sort of actor's mindset, or that they hate public speaking, things like that, which is why I think and this is one of the reasons I'm here really, is because I think it's really, really important to remember that narrators are there for you. They're there to work with you. They're not just taking your story, doing what they want with it. Okay, cheers, thanks very much, see you later, next project. I think when it comes to narrating an audiobook, something that has so much substance to it, such a history to it, and something that lives there on the shelves. As a narrator, your name is against that. You've pledged a bit of a commitment to that story, and you're forever going to be associated with it. So I believe very, very strongly in a stronger collaboration between authors and narrators. So if authors are thinking about narrating a book themselves and they genuinely feel, do you know what? I've got that performance quality. I think I can really pull this off. I can play these characters. I voice them in my house all the time. I'm a natural performer. I reckon I can do this. Brilliant stuff. Talk to a narrator anyway about fulfilling those technical requirements to make sure that you've got the right sound quality, the right equipment. But if you feel confident doing it, great. However, the collaboration between author and narrator, when it works well, is fabulous.
What would be the one audiobook maybe that you've listened to that it's stuck with you?
Lexie Reese, who wrote Eternal Seas, who published her book Through Yourselves. It was the first time I saw a book and I thought, I have to have this one. I have to write this one. It was perfect. Now, I'd done some children's books before in the past aimed at slightly younger audience, but there was something about it that just made me think, I think this is a great direction to go in. For me, professionally, and also for the quality of writing and the influences that went into that book and the villains and the heroes and even the funny characters like Finn, the main character, can talk to sea creatures. So the dolphins and crabs will pop in and chime in with conversation. And I just think I've got so many ideas for these things. And unfortunately, we're able to work together. But it wasn't just that really stuck with me, the book that stuck with me, or the series really, but her work ethic as well. And she was the one that opened my eyes to this idea of collaboration, about narrators not just turning up, doing the job and disappearing, but working together to promote reading for young people, to promote audiobooks by way of educating. She's very, very committed to advancing young people's skills in reading, creative writing. And those were principles that I had at the time as well. And I just thought, this is a great match.
If you had to give 3 top tips for an author who's looking at starting their audiobook process, what would they be?
Okay, the first thing I would suggest is to listen, to just absorb audiobooks as a fan, first of all. And even if you've got your Audible membership and you've been listening to loads and loads over the years, or you're actually quite a novice to actually consuming audiobooks yourself, go back and listen, grab some of your favorite books off the shelf and find the audio versions of those books and see how that text has been brought to life and see what it can do. Find some strong examples that you like and find some examples that maybe didn't work quite so well. It's all subjective. It's totally up to you what you consider to be a good performance. At the end of the day, you're putting your book in the hands of a voiceover. You need to make sure that it's the right person for the job. So almost put together a bit of a mental criteria. I need someone who can do this. I need someone who can be strong with accents. I need someone who's got a rich, chocolatey voice. I need somebody who can be a bit more animated and a bit more upbeat. I need somebody who can be high-pitched or low-pitched or whatever, with more gravitas, less gravitas. Try and think of it in those contexts and try and sort of categorize the narrators that you go out there and discover in the world and think, okay, the measure of a good narrator for me is this. Now, where are they? Which leads me to my second piece of advice, which is talk to them, reach out and talk to them. That the writing community, as authors and publishers will know, on social media is buzzing. It's so alive and it's so much fun because everyone's so engaging and sharing content every minute of every single day. The voiceover community is exactly the same. We're as chatty as anyone. So yeah, reach out on social media and just get some advice. And the last thing is quite simple: work together. Now, beforehand, during, and after. Collaborate. In any field of creativity, collaboration is one of the top 3. Collaboration is the one thing that is going to make sure that the creative industry still has a future, because it's in more of a scary situation than ever this year. So collaborate. So work together with your narrator as much as you can and celebrate the release of your audiobook together. I think through collaboration, you'll get more eyes and ears on your product. It'll boost your personal brand as an author as well. And it gets you ready for what is happening, which is an absolute boom in on-demand entertainment. I mean, this is the time to get your audio out there and to use digital to your advantage to get these stories out there. And as long as stories continue to be shared as much as possible, then society will be a better place for it.
I think what Chris said there about collaboration is so important. It takes a lot for an author to trust someone else with the voicing of their work. So by having that good relationship and by working together, the final product has a far better chance of reflecting the world that the author's created. I think it's obvious that communication between the author and voice actor is so important to understand the characters and their history, whether that be through direct communication or via an author questionnaire, such as we do here at Troubadour.
I think this also applies to non-fiction titles as well, which often have a specific point to get across. If the main crux of the book hasn't come across by the narrator missing the point, the finished audiobook just won't carry the same message as the printed book.
It sounds like Chris really enjoyed working with Lexie Reese on Eternal Seas, so Andrea spoke to Lexie to see if the process was just as good from an author's point of view.
I'm Lexie Reese, and I write children's fiction, and also I've got a series of activity books. So the fiction that I've written is middle grade fantasy adventures, and it's a series called The Relic Hunters, and the first two have been published. They're Eternal Seas and Wild Sky. And the third one I'm currently writing at the moment, so that should come out probably not this year, probably be early next year, thanks to COVID, by the time it's all ready to go.
So you've got an audiobook which is out and available for people to buy for your first title. What made you want to do an audiobook?
I listen to a lot of audiobooks. In fact, I listen to an audiobook every day when I'm dog walking, and I just really enjoy it. Enjoy them myself. And when my son was younger, we used to listen to children's audiobooks in the car every time we drove anywhere, really, even if it was a relatively short journey. And we've done the sitting in the car waiting for the chapter to finish, even though we've arrived at our destination. So I love audiobooks, and I think it's a really interesting market. It opens up books to a different audience as well as to existing readers. It's good, if you have reluctant readers in the house, or just for fitting into nooks and crannies when you're busy doing other things but would like a story on in the background.
How did you meet Chris? Whereabouts did you find his work, and what made you choose him?
So I went to ACX, which is the Audible platform, and posted up on there when I started looking to turn Eternal Seas, the first book, into an audiobook. And I selected 3 sections for an audition tape, and I purposely picked those 3 sections because they were quite different. There were different characters speaking, and I knew that I really wanted to hear how different narrators would approach those different characters. So I just put up on ACX, and I got lots of different auditions and listened to them all. And Chris was one of those. And I kind of knew within 3 seconds that his voices, because there were several, matched what was in my head. Yeah, I knew really, really quickly. I mean, it wasn't that the others were bad. They just weren't quite what I had in my head.
So did you contact him straight away then?
Yeah, so obviously I went back to him. The ACX platform is really easy to use. So I just messaged back, and there was one voice that I wanted him to try an alteration. And that was also quite important in the process, because I wasn't quite sure how I would articulate what was in my head and whether the narrator would understand my explanation of the voice that I was hearing. And so I asked him to make a small change to one of the characters, and he got it and he did it. And it was like, oh, well, that's just perfect. This is going to work really, really well. Yeah, so we talked quite a bit, and we sort of exchanged a lot of emails about the different characters, about the plot, about inspiration behind the different characters, so that he could really get into them. And I mean, his voices are fantastic. He hops around from one voice to another.
It's nice to hear that he got and he understood your characters.
Yeah, he got it straight away, really. But we sent a lot of character briefs backwards and forwards, and he asked questions so that he understood the differences of each character. So he basically got character profiles like you would send an editor. You get your character profiles when you're writing the physical book. He went through that.
So how long did it take from when you got your first chapter from him to the completed product?
He works really quickly, actually. He's a ball of energy. So he flew through the recordings, and as he's finished each chapter, I would go through and send back any little edits, which was, there was some nautical terms. So some of those I wanted the pronunciation changed, or just occasionally I wanted a slightly different word emphasized in a sentence. But there was hardly any. I mean, there was maybe, 1 or 2 edits per chapter. He would quickly make those changes and then upload them, and then we'd hit submit. So it went through that process really, really quickly into the getting it uploaded and ready to go. And then the ACX process starts, and that obviously is out of our control on the timelines.
Did you start the process with a little bit of apprehension? Because obviously you've lived these characters. They mean a lot to you. And did you worry how the final product would sound?
No, because as soon as I heard Chris's voices, I knew that they were right. I was never in any doubt whatsoever that it was not going to match what was in my head. The auditions are really, really crucial. So choosing the right segments of the book, and obviously I didn't just start at page 1 and upload the first chapter, because that would, wouldn't bring in the variety that comes through the book. It was different characters from scenes throughout the book that I knew were really, really critical scenes, and if I knew that if those scenes were good on the audition tape and did what I needed them to do, they were the scenes that I thought would be the most challenging for the narrator to come up with what was in my head, and Chris got those right in the audition tape.
Do you think it's important that an author has a good relationship with the voiceover artist and feels like that they can actually say, oh, actually, no, you've not quite pronounced this the way I would like. Would you mind doing this?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's a partnership, isn't it? I mean, it's like the illustrator in an illustrated book. The words and the pictures go together. The words and the voice go together. Yeah, so Chris and I had a good relationship, and when people buy an audiobook, when I buy an audiobook, I look at the narrator, and the first thing I do is I listen to the voice sample. So it's really important that there's a good connection between you, and also post publication, he shares videos, and he's made little behind the scenes videos for me. That's all part of the relationship, and then obviously I've shared videos because people that listen to my books that he's narrated other books as well. So there's a whole connection of cross-fertilization of readers. So that whole connection is really important, and yeah, it works well.
Did you ever consider narrating it yourself?
Oh, good grief, no. I couldn't do justice to the voices that are in my head. No, that's not something I could do. I mean, I do have a friend who's currently sitting in a cupboard narrating her own book, but she's a braver woman than me.
Was there anything else you wanted to add in regards to your audiobook publishing journey that you think would be worth self-publishing authors knowing about?
So one thing. I know that sometimes people, when they have illustrated books, they either do or don't put the illustrator's name on the front cover. I would urge you to put both your illustrator's name on the front cover if you've got one, but also put your narrator's name on the audiobook cover. The one thing that really surprised me was when I said to Chris, do you want to be Chris or Christopher on the cover? He said I was the first author he'd worked with that had actually put his name on the cover. And given the narrator is so integral to the book, that really surprised me. So yeah, if I was going to urge people to do something, it's credit your narrator, because they're such an important part of an audiobook. They deserve that spot on the front cover.
So both Chris and Lexie have similar opinions on authors recording their own audiobook, and the general consensus seems to be that you need to ensure that the final product is professional. So if you have the right setup and the confidence to do it yourself, then go for it. But if you've got any doubts or reservations, then definitely speak to a professional actor and enlist their help.
That's one reason why we introduced our audiobook service here at Matador. We only work with professional actors who use the correct tools for the job and have years of experience of acting. It can mean that the process doesn't take as long, as our narrators are trained to read without tripping over their words, which leads to many rereads. They also have that natural performance quality and can act their way through a book, bringing the work to life. Our digital manager, Megan Lockwood-Jones, gives us an outline of what our audiobook production service entails.
Our audiobook production costs are based on the word count of the book, as this affects how long it takes to record the audiobook. The first step in our audiobook production process is for the author to choose an actor that they'd like to record their book. We offer a range of different voices to suit different genres. Our voiceover artists are listed on our website, where you can listen to a sample clip from each of the voiceover artists. Once an author has made their choice of narrator, we would confirm availability and the likely production timescale. Our voiceover artists are working actors, with their main job being in TV, film, on stage, or voicing other audiobooks, so they may not be available immediately. We then ask our authors to complete a questionnaire about their book, providing a brief for the narrator. This covers things that the author feels the narrator should know, so any accents that characters have or particular passages where they'd like it read in a certain tone. Recording would begin once all of the book or ebook production files have been signed off. This ensures that the text read for the audiobook matches that of the printed book and/or ebook. The recording of an audiobook will usually take place over a number of days, as an actor's voice cannot narrate for 8 hours solid. Then the sound engineer needs to edit the files and create the finished recording. Once we have the completed recording, a copy is sent to the author for checking. We advise that our authors listen to the entire audiobook recording to ensure that no text has been omitted during the recording process. We allow up to an hour of studio time for necessary re-recordings of missing text, and then the final recording is produced. Whilst the recording has taken place, we will produce the square audiobook cover, and this would be based on your book and/or ebook cover. Some authors choose to distribute their own audiobooks, so at this stage we would supply the author with their files. However, most authors do choose to have us handle the distribution for them. We now offer 2 distribution options. Our basic distribution option, which involves distribution exclusively through Amazon, Audible and Apple, and then our full distribution service, which offers a wider distribution network, still distributing through Amazon, Audible and Apple, but also to other retailers and streaming sites, including Spotify, YouTube, Deezer, Google Play and Napster. I'm now very excited to announce that we've just launched an audiobook marketing service too. We've designed a service that uses online marketing tools that can be used by us and by the author to help promote the audiobook, as well as giving it a push to audiobook reviewers, bloggers and journalists online. For costs and more information about our services, please do visit our website at www.troubadour.co.uk.
So Megan touched there on our new audiobook marketing service, which we've just launched, but it's hard to know where to start when marketing an audiobook. If you're looking at carrying out some marketing yourself, our marketing assistant, Emily Dakin, has put together some of her top tips.
A lot of people tell us that they don't know where to start when marketing an audiobook, so I thought it would be helpful to give some of our top tips for getting the most out of your audiobook before, during and after publication. Number 1, make sure you update your social media channels. You need to let your followers know that you've got an audiobook coming out, so post snippets from the early recordings and share your audiobook cover. Number 2, contacting audiobook bloggers to see if they want to review your audiobook. Some bloggers only review audiobooks, so make contact with them early on to get them interested. Number 3, if your audiobook is being distributed exclusively through ACX, you can give out free copies using ACX codes to reviewers. Everyone likes a freebie and people may be more inclined to review it if they've not paid for it. Number 4, if you've already had your ebook listed on NetGalley, you can now add your audiobook sample to your ebook's NetGalley page. You can then get feedback on the sample to see if they've liked what they heard and if they'd like to listen to more. You never know, they may then go on to buy a copy.
So, now for some news from the publishing world. The shortlist for the 2020 Booker Prize has been announced, and of the 6 authors included, 4 of them are from independent publishers and the majority from debut authors. A brilliant moment for indie publishers. There's also much more diversity in the nominations, with The Guardian describing them as the most diverse shortlist ever. There is, as usual with the Booker, some controversy, with the omission of Hilary Mantel's new novel The Mirror and the Light, which, if she had won, would have made her the only author in history to win the award 3 times.
The first week of September saw what has been called a mini Super Thursday, with over 260 trade hardbacks released in preparation for the Christmas rush. This is a 20% increase on the number of titles released in the same time last year. This is no doubt a consequence from the coronavirus affecting publishing schedules, with many of these titles potentially having been originally scheduled for the summer. However, the high publicity in the media about the mini Super Thursday led to a surge in footfall in bookstores, with some indie bookshops reporting a spike in sales on that day. After the tough summer that bookshops have had, any increase in footfall can only be a good thing.
And finally, the Frankfurt Book Fair, one of publishing's biggest events, is due to go ahead from the 14th to the 18th of October. The event will be mainly digital, with presentations and meetings happening over the week. Having a digital conference can work, though, if the Independent Publishers Guild conference is anything to go by. A few of our members of staff digitally attended and were very impressed with the setup and sessions.
As this podcast has been exploring the world of audiobooks, we thought it would be perfect to end with a sample of one of our upcoming audiobooks. E.J. Pepper's new novel Flight Path is our next audiobook to be released and is bursting with suspense and intrigue. narrated by Sebastian Abineri. Keep an eye on our social media channels for when it's available to buy.
The first surprise came when Alan ushered him not into his study, but into the room used for governors' meetings. Miles had always found its oak furniture, mullioned windows and diamond-patterned carpet a reassuring reminder of a more civilised and mannered world. Even more of a surprise, however, was seeing the people seated behind the long table: Hugo Paget, the current chair of governors, the deputy head, Cosgrave, Burrows, the school solicitor, and the diminutive geography master, Lang. Sanderson nodded Miles towards the single chair that was placed facing them, and after a moment's hesitation he settled himself into it, nodding across to indicate he bore no ill will over having to leave his breakfast at short notice. No one met his eye, and there was some shifting in seats, almost as if they were about to be interviewed by him. Paget, one of those large-boned, broad-shouldered men who looked as if they had been reared on steak and claret, was the first to speak. "We wondered what comments you have, Miles, about the incident last Tuesday." "Last Tuesday?" he echoed, trying to gather his thoughts. "But hasn't Alan explained?" Alan coughed. "Unfortunately, there have been certain," he paused, "developments."
And that's all we have time for in this episode. But do join us next time when we'll be looking at different and exciting ways you can market your book.
You've been listening to The Self-Publishing Experience. Learn more about indie and self-publishing at our website, troubadour.co.uk.